Welcome to Halacha in a Year, where we can get to learn all the most relevant halacha through the prism of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. You are listening to Rabbi Ya'akov Trump. This year is kindly sponsored by the Moshe Group and CA in zechus of Rivka Biela, bas נחמה Shifra, and in honor of Rabbi Trump. Today we're going to be looking at the halachas of Shehechiyanu and Hatov Umeitiv. This is part 1 of Siman Nuntes, the 59th chapter of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. We're going to be looking at today 3 basic concepts: brachos on good and bad tidings, birth and death, and buying new items. Let's jump straight in. We know this is based on the Mishnah in brachos in the 9th parak, that a person is required to say a bracha on good tidings. So therefore, if a person hears good news, they should say the bracha of Shehechiyanu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed us to live to witness the special moment and marker in life. If it is a thing which is good, not just for the person himself, but for others benefit from it as well, the bracha would be Hatov Umeitiv. HaKadosh Baruch Hu does good and projects that good to others as well. The Mishnah goes on to say that a person is responsible to also say a blessing on negative tidings, on sad tidings. Gam ala ra'ah. This is learned from one of the many sources that it's learned from, is the pasuk we say in Kriya Shema at the very beginning, V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha, you should love Hashem your God, b'chol vavcha, v'chol ashecha, v'chol modecha, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your ma'od. When it means with all your heart, it refers to Shnei Yitzarecha, both your inclinations, your good and your negative intention, meaning to say, even the parts which are more corrupt in the character, which are more challenging, should be pivoted and channeled towards Hashem. That's because there are 2 bases in levavcha, not libcha, as it should be in Hebrew. B'chol nafshecha means afilu notel nafshecha. There's times that one has to put one's life down for Judaism. Not all the time, but there are certain circumstances where it's called for. And finally, the last one, b'chol moedecha, you have to love Hashem with all your ma'od. There are 2 interpretations. One is b'chol mamoncha, with all your ma'od, which means your a lot, which means money. You have to give up your money to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It means if a person has to transgress a negative commandment, a person is expected to give up all their worldly assets, not to transgress that. And the other option is b'chol mida umida shu moeded lecha. Any of the cards that Hashem deals us, any characteristic that Hashem turns to us to, whether it's we feel good or we feel negative, we say a bracha, and that is the bracha of a dayan ha'emes. The Kitzur therefore advises that a person, based on the Gemara, should be ragil. A person should be accustomed to saying Kol ma da'avid rachmana l'tav avid. Everything Hashem does is for the good, even when one cannot feel it necessarily at that moment that one's experiencing it. So let's look at a few questions on these brachas on good and bad tidings. So why are the 2 brachas on the good? We saw that you say Shehechiyanu if it's relating just to yourself, and Hatov Umeitiv if others are the beneficiaries of that good as well. What happens if one hears a number of good tidings or a number of bad tidings, Rahman al-Litzlan? What should one do? Does each get their own bracha? So the answer is no. One says one Hatov Umeitiv on all the good tidings one hears at once, or Dana Emes on all the negative tidings that one hears at once. It does not need to be independent unless there are different settings. What happens if one hears the news in the bathroom? So one's not able to say a bracha at that stage. So then one would have to not say the bracha then, even though that's the moment that one has the epiphany, one has the experience emotionally. One would leave the restroom or the place that's unclean and then say the bracha. What should one's mood be when saying the bracha or dayan ha'emes? So this is also based on the Mishnah in brachos, that it needs to be that a person has the same level of connection and zechus to Hashem in saying that, and that one has the same level of connection that, based on this pasuk, is chesed umishpat ashir lecha, based on the pasuk, which is that through kindness and through justice, I'm going to sing to you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whether it's the good or it's the difficulty. And therefore, if one is able to achieve this, first of all, it attains kapara, atonement for one's sins, when one embraces the very painful negative parts of one's life. But even more than that, in a certain sense, it turns this experience into avodas Hashem. It turns this into a way of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is a very profound level that a person can reach. What happens when he has good news that has the potential to becoming bad? So the example he gives is a person finds a lost object, but there is a potential that living in a society without accountability and democracy, that the government will find out and take it and penalize a person for finding a lost object. So it could turn negative. So one still says Hatov Umeitiv. What happens if one hears bad news but has the potential to become good? So the example he gives is one's field is flooded, so it causes immense damage, but it's going to fertilize it for later on. So one still says Dayana Emes because we don't look at the future potentialities, we look at the experience that one is going through right now, which is very much the Torah's way of looking at things. We're going to move on to our second concept, birth and death. So what is the bracha on childbirth? For a boy, one says Hatov Umeitiv. For a girl, one says Shehechiyanu. Who says that bracha? Halacha is both the mother and the father. When is it said? So a person should say this at the time of birth. So many people just don't know this halacha. They're young, they have not learned the halachas, they have a child, they feel so overjoyed, but they don't pervert this. It's worthwhile noting that this is the minhag Ashkenaz. Sfardim actually for a boy wait till a little later. And what if the mother dies in childbirth? Rachmana litzlan. This is a very common occurrence and still unfortunately happens. In that case, the father would say Baruch Dayana Emes, and then Shehechiyanu. For even if it's a son, it would only be a Shehechiyanu because only one of them is gaining from this because the mother is no longer there to be the beneficiary. What happens if the father dies before the birth? Chas v'shalom. This has happened a number of times in the war. So in this case, the mother says Shehechiyanu for a son or a daughter. What happens if one hears of the death of a relative? In that case, one says the full bracha. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam dayana emes. We have the custom that the Avelim only say this at the actual funeral because that's the time when the kriya is done and it can be done in unison, it can be done together as opposed to each person individually. What happens if the person isn't a relative? So if the person one hears about who dies is a Talmid Chacham or an Ish Kasher or an Adam Kasher, a righteous person, then one says the full bracha. But if it's a regular person one hears about and it's sad news, but it's not that one's related, it's not a person who's a towering figure in the generation, then one would say Baruch Dayana Emes without the Shema Malchus. I don't think typing BDE suffices for that. That certainly trivializes the experience. What if one hears of a relative who passes away and one knows that one will also inherit part of their estate? So then one would say Baruch Dayana Emes on hearing the tiding of their death, but then say Shehechiyanu if one is the single inheritor on the inheritance, or Hatov Umeitiv if there are other inheritors or beneficiaries of this inheritance, say in one's own family, then there would be Hatov Umeitiv. So one is able to say both brachos for a complex experience that a person is undergoing. We look at the third and last concept today, and that is buying new items, where we say there's brachos of Shehechiyanu. Let's jump straight in. If I bought a new house or I build a new house, what bracha do I say? The answer is Shehechiyanu. What happens if I buy movable items? So then if they are important items that make me happy, then I would say Shehechiyanu. What about a car? So if it's bought, one says Shehechiyanu. If it's leased, one does not say a bracha. What if everyone at home also uses the new item? It's the house, everybody's using it. It's the car, everybody's using it. Then one would say Hatov Umeitiv because they are other beneficiaries to this goodness that one is experiencing. When is the bracha actually said? So most people are not aware of this. It should be said at the time of purchase. What if the item is not ready? So for instance, the house needs fixing, the clothes need tailoring. Then it's said at the time of usage. What bracha is said on wearing new clothes actually when wearing this? So one says the bracha of Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam malbish aramim, Hashem who clothes the naked. What if I already said that at Shachris? That's one of the brachas I say as Birkas HaShachar, as the morning brachas. Then if one was wearing it at that time, then it was Yotzei. But if not, let's say it's an Erev Shabbos. One says that bracha malbish aramim on Friday morning, but on for Shabbos I'm putting on a new suit, a woman's wearing a new dress. Then one would say malbish aramim. Then, what if is a hat? Then one would say the bracha of Atar Yisrael b'Sifara. What happens if it's a new belt? Then one would say Ozer Yisrael b'Gvura. These are brachas which relate to those specific items of clothing. Wait, I don't see people doing this around me. I have lots of people to get new clothes. I don't see people saying this bracha. So the reason is there's a little bit of a debate as to it warrants its own bracha. So it's advisable, says the Kitzur, to put it on in the morning to be able to say the bracha of Malbish Aramim or Tari Yisrael Sifara or Zer Yisrael B'Gvura and relate it to that item. Most people are not aware of this. This is a very beautiful custom of ritualizing, of deepening the experience of one's new acquisition. What if I buy a new talis? If it comes with tzitzis on it, one says Shehechiyanu when one buys it. If it comes without the tzitzis and one makes it with the tzitzis, one says Shehechiyanu after finishing putting on the tzitzis. If one misses both those opportunities, then one says it when wearing it. If when I'm putting on and when I'm wearing it, when does it go in relationship to the other bracha of Lisatev Batzitzis? So the answer is it goes after Lisatev Batzitzis. That's when one says the Shehechiyanu. What about buying a beged cotton, a talis cotton? One does not say a bracha on that. What if one receives a gift? Then one would say Hatov Umeitiv. Why not Shehechiyanu? The reason is because when one gives and receives a gift, both people feel good. The giver and the receiver feel good. So it's Hatov Umeitiv for both of the recipient and the giver. What happens if I buy a new sefer? The Kitzur says a sefer does not get a bracha because it is a mitzvah to learn Torah. One does not say a bracha on Shehechiyanu on a mitzvah that one has to do anyway. The Mishnah Berurah says there's room to still say Shehechiyanu on a sefer one buys, because the mitzvah is learning, not just owning. There's a certain simcha which is had in just owning and buying. What types of clothes need a bracha? So, unimportant clothes do not need a bracha. So, excluded from the Shehechiyanu bracha are shirts, socks, and shoes, which do not get a bracha. What happens if one is a very poor person and one really has a lot of joy from wearing these? Still, there's no bracha. What happens if one's very rich on the other end of the spectrum and regular clothes don't excite one? Then in that case, unfortunately, one loses the bracha, which is a sad thing. If a person becomes so overindulgent, there's so much that one has enough that one doesn't even appreciate the small things. It's a sadness. Is there a special bracha given to someone who has a new item of clothing? The answer is yes. This is not commonly known. One should say, Tevaleh usechadesh. You should be zechus to wear this well, wear it out, and buy a new one. Meaning it's almost a blessing that it's not about the clothing itself, it's about your experience in it. You should live and be well to use this well to the end of its usage and then get a new one. Is this for all clothing? The answer is no, not for leather clothing. And the reason is because by saying Tevaleh usechadesh, you should wear it out and get a new one, it would mean another animal would have to be killed in order to make this, because that's how leather is made. It's the skins of animals. And the Kitzur adds, Al Kol Ma'asav, Hashem is merciful upon all his creations, and that we don't wish that other creations would need to die for this consumer. For this we conclude, and we'll do the last two concepts in Shehechiyanu Hatov Umeitiv next time. Have a wonderful and meaningful day.